Most of us know that Fenrir is the newest operator in Rainbow Six, but he also takes the title of being the most complex operator in the game, starting out with 5 mines, 3 calls, and a ton of different gadget interactions that go along with it. Fenrir has a lot going on. But have no worries, because by the end of this video, you'll understand not only Fenrir and his ability, but the best way to play him and why he's one of the strongest operators in Rainbow Six right now. On top of all that, he's hands down the #1 solo queue defender in the game, so it might be worth your time to get to know him. Before we start breaking down the details of Fenrir, I want to mention that some of the best games that I've had with him are posted in their full form over on my second channel. I upload daily over there with some of my best uncut champion rank games, and it's a great place to study exactly how top players play the game. The link to it is in the description. Plus, it's also just a great way to get to know me better or get more Pox Unlocks content if you're interested in that. And if not, then that's fine too, because the rest of this video is all about Fenrir. We can't quite dive into the strategy of Fenrir until we fully understand the depths and details of his FNAT dread mines, which I'll be referring to as dreads throughout this video and in my future rank games. Understanding exactly how these things work and what the various interactions are is important to get a better idea of what you can and cannot do as Fenrir. It will also help you understand what defenders will work well with him to make him more impactful and what attackers are his best counters. Fenrir has 5 dreads that he can place around the map fairly quickly, however he only has 3 calls to activate them with. Each dread mine is deactivated when first placed, but the calls allow you to choose which 3 of the 5 are active at any given time. Active dreads are in constant open positions and are 1 HP, meaning they can be destroyed with a single bullet, a laser zap from Twitcher 0, or any explosive damage. Inactive traps on the other hand are bulletproof and can only be destroyed by explosives or a Gon 6, but they won't do anything at all unless they're activated manually with one of Fenrir's 3 calls. When an attacker enters the proximity of an active dread mine, they will be consumed by gas shortly after, blocking their vision. When they're sprayed by it, however, there is a full blind money back guarantee. What this means is that sprinting through an active dread mine's radius will not stop the ability from taking hold of you just because you've left the radius, so if you're rushing or caught off in a bad spot, it can be extremely lethal. Basically, if you enter the radius at any point for literally any amount of time, you will get fully blinded. If an attacker enters the radius of an active mine and stays in it, then they will continue to be blind until they destroy the dread or leave the radius, at which point the ability will start to dissipate about a second later and they'll get their vision back again. This blind effect will also affect defenders if they're in the proximity of the dread mine when the attacker activates it. This does exclude Fenrir though, who is completely immune to them. So that's essentially what they do, but there's a whole lot more complexity to this ability. The first is the actual calls themselves. I know I said that he has 3 calls, but there's a bit of a catch here. If an active dread mine gets destroyed, the call you use to keep it active will get destroyed along with it. So you'll only be able to have 2 of the remaining 4 dreads active if one of the active mines gets destroyed. If the attackers destroy 3 active mines over the course of the round, there's no possible way for there to be any active traps left. Any leftover inactive traps will be useless and have no way of being activated. The last level of complexity comes from Brava. Hacking an active dread mine will turn it into your team's favor and eliminate one of the calls that Fenrir has. As a loyal attacker gadget now, defenders in the proximity of it will set it off instead of the attackers. Fenrir himself will still activate a hacked dread mine, but it won't blind him thanks to this cool juggernaut mask thing that he has. And finally, Brava hacking a deactivated dread will just simply destroy it. And then we have Knock and Glaz, who do not counter Fenrir, which I find pretty surprising, and I think it could be a potential balancing change in the future because Fenrir is very, very strong. It might not be completely obvious to you quite yet, but once we dive into the theory and strategy of this operator, it might become even more clear. And that's exactly what we're gonna do now, to show off how dominantly powerful this cheek clapping operator really is. The most reliable and simple way to play Fenrir is to anchor on site, with your dreads placed on the various entrances into the site. Some are better slightly outside the site though, especially on the less common entrances to give you the heads up on an attacker sneaking in behind. When you're anchoring as Fenrir, stay tucked in areas near your dreads to be ready to swing once they go off. Because of that small activation time, you'll want to wait a second before swinging so that you're not getting shot in the face while they still have their vision. If you can identify where the main push is coming from, you have a couple options. The first is that you activate your dreads on the backside. This is probably not as strong as the second option, but it saves you from being flanked as you'll have information on that player. If the flank dread goes off, you'll want to get aggressive on that attacker because they're more than likely alone, and relieving that backside pressure will put the round into your favor. The second option is to prioritize the front side dreads and use any extra calls that you have left over for the flank. This way, when the attackers inevitably push into the site and try and execute, the dreads will go off and you're guaranteed guaranteed to impair their push. This does take safety away from your backside, so setting up some barbed wire on the various flank routes or barricading doors there during the prep phase is a great idea. The reason I think this anchor style is stronger is because more of the attackers are coming from this area, making it much more likely that the dreads are actually used and therefore making your gadget more effective in the grand scheme of things. Now, if you need to freshen up your gameplay or just aren't a fan of playing on site, then you can bring Fenrir on a roam instead. When roaming with Fenrir, it's still a great idea to place 1 or 2 dreads on the site for your team. That way off the start of the round, you can have these active in case the enemy team rushes. With the other mines, you can place them around the area you're roaming, and any attackers who misdrone them or don't drone them out at all will be caught off and blinded. Make sure you actually switch the calls from the site mines to these roaming ones in the early round. By playing around 1 of the 3 dreads, you could catch a free kill, but just the sheer amount of information on its own is enough to give you a safety net that you can make plays off of. If you know an area is clear thanks to the dread there that hasn't been hit, you're able to fall off to that area safely and keep your back to it knowing that you're protected by that information. In the ideal round, you get a kill or 2, fall off the roam, and head back to site to keep the man advantage, which at that point you would take your calls off of the dreads that you set up on the roam and activate the ones on site. This just adds a layer of information to every single part of the round and gives you that added protection all the way through it. And that's really why Fenrir is so strong. It's a constant safety net that protects you while being extremely lethal to any attackers that walk into it. We can level up both these strategies even more though by having ideal positioning of the mines. There's a small thing that you have to consider when placing them, and some spots are much better than others.
Oh yeah, that's the spot, baby.
The key to ideal placement of the dreads is to put them in areas that don't give the attackers time to get to cover. For example, if you put it above a door frame, the attacker can simply walk back out of the doorway after hitting the dread. They'll be blind for a couple seconds, but they'll be in cover and your teammates won't be able to capitalize on it and get the kill. Instead, if we put the dreads on chandeliers or in an open area, that attacker has basically nowhere to hide once they activate it. They can try to turn around and escape to cover, but it makes their job much more difficult and it increases the odds that you'll actually be able to capitalize on the utility. This is a great option, especially if you can find a really good spot for it, but sometimes just having the info is more important, like on your flank. Fenrir's really solid, even if we just think about him with 3 mines instead of 5. They're arguably stronger than Melusi Wubs, Ella's Grismont mines, and Thorn Traps, meaning setting up 3 in solid spots and activating them all and not worrying about the other 2 is actually kind of viable. What this means is that you could keep 2 in your pocket. Once you know where they're pushing or you need extra information or support on an area, you can throw it out and move one of the calls to that location. Even if you die, the 3 mines will still stay active, so hopping out a window and going 1 for 1 is worth it, knowing that your utility will still be there to help the rest of your team while the attacker is losing all of theirs. We're gonna get into a very unique Fenrir strategy very shortly, but first let's talk about his loadout. Somehow even Fenrir's loadout is complex, having the option between the MP7 and the sausage, and then either the 5.7 or the bailiff as a secondary. What this means is if you run the MP7, you can run the bailiff, and if you run the sausage, you can still have a pistol for the range. Either way, you can have a shotgun that will allow you to make holes, rotates, or open hatches, which is a very strong asset. Now, Fenrir either has barbed wire or a bulletproof camera. Personally, I like the barbed wire because it gives him even more information, but the bulletproof is good too. Typically, it would be best to run the MP7 bailiff combo, but counting out the sausage is a complete amateur move, especially with the extremely unique ability that Fenrir has. Because Fenrir himself can see dreads through walls, it lines up the perfect opportunity for wallbangs. Placing dreads on the other side of soft walls will not only blind attackers, but allow you to start shredding them through the wall with the sausage. This is very site dependent, but if you have a good spot to pull it off, it is ridiculously powerful. Having the ability to see all the dreads and where they are from anywhere on the map is great information, but I think it's highly misinterpreted to just how much information this really is. Not only is it information when someone pushes from that area and activates it, but it's also information when nobody is pushing from that area. Knowing that an area is clear allows you to actively ignore it and focus your attention somewhere else without the concern of someone coming from there. If they do come from there, you will be notified, and that's when you can switch your focus. If you have multiple areas with active dread mines that aren't being set off, you know that those areas are clear, meaning the attackers have to be coming from somewhere else. It works the same way with default cameras. If you only have one of the 3 exterior cameras, you know that their entire team has to be coming from those 2 other areas where the cameras were shot, and you can reposition yourself or your utility in the early round to prepare for it. I do think Fenrir is extremely strong, especially solo queuing, because he provides himself with so much information and it makes it so you don't need to rely on your teammates for that information. Again, Again, I think making Knock or Glaz or having another individual operator to counter him would be awesome, but let me know what your thoughts on this are in the comments. There are also only 4 bans per game right now, with 2 of them being defenders. With the addition of so many strong defenders lately like Solus, Azami, and now Fenrir, along with other strong defenders like Mirakate and Valk, we might be seeing more bans coming in the future. I personally think it would be really cool to have like a wild card ban for each team after the first 4 initial bans, where the team can choose to ban either another defender or attacker, for a total of 6 operators banned. So that could be 4 attackers and 2 defenders total, or 4 defenders and 2 attackers, or 3 of each. I think it'd be super interesting and change up the game quite a bit. I hope you learned something, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to stay subscribed for more Rainbow Six action. And go subscribe to my second channel to watch the real magic happen.